Hello, I'm Erika D. Smith, a columnist with the Los Angeles Times. Thank you so much for tuning into this Ideas Exchange. Our guests tonight are inaugural poet, author, activist, and LA native Amanda Gorman, as well as Pulitzer Prize-winning author, former US Poet Laureate, Tracy K. Smith. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Hey.
Hi, thanks for having us. I'm so happy to be here.
And I wanted to ask you, what was it like emotionally to write The Hill We Climb, in the months before that? I mean, which
Mhm.
was between the pandemic, the multiple, upheavals over racial injustice. I mean, those were many terrifying hours, I think, for this country. What was it like?
Mm. Writing The Hill We Climb was honestly an emotionally grotesque experience, mostly because it was so demanding. It necessitated that I revisit and review particularly dark but also honest pieces of my nation's history while I was also living current horrors in the present. And so I wrote a note to myself because it's something that I don't want to forget. Because
Mhm.
even I think with the visibility that I've gained or the kind of glam that might come from fame, I wrote a note to myself in my journal. Remember that when you wrote The Hill We Climb, it was like a fever. I didn't talk to my friends for 2 weeks, basically. I ate the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and all I did every single day was write. It was like I was possessed. My mind couldn't think about cooking or cleaning, or I had friends texting me, and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm basically underwater right now. And so it felt kind of like drowning, but also like a baptism. It was like going to the deep place, going to the deep waters, and then emerging with kind of what I'd been able to emotionally witness there. And so I'm just so grateful that from that type of poetic labor, people have been able to resonate with the piece and have been able to find pieces that are so important to them. I mean, that's all you can ask for as a poet.
Tracy, I know you've been writing over the past year as well. What has that been like? How have you interpret that through what you've been doing?
Well, I have felt that poetry has given me a form of reflection, dialogue, and consolation that I've long felt as a poet. But this year, with the loss, the trauma on a public but also an intimate scale, because um, everybody's suffering was manifest in different spaces over the year, and so I was made to feel the discomfort and fear of others, and I'm sure I projected my own anxieties outward. Poetry helped me to claim those feelings, to dig a little bit deeper and get to a place where thought, language, image, association, and music began to speak back to me. And that's what I'm always looking for when I'm writing a poem. I'm looking for the moment when my own words somehow take on a different kind of authority and they're capable of offering me some sort of insight or guidance. Over
Mhm.
this past year, I've needed that in a way that has felt much more urgent, much more dire than it has in the past. And I guess I'll also say that I've felt, and this is one way that I really relate to what Amanda you were saying about, letting the world in, thinking about what you need and wish to say to it. Um, I've been trying to feel that my own process was capable of giving me access to the moment we're living in, and hopefully to a history. I've thought of it as almost an ancestral history, because we know that as just disconcerting as this year was, it actually brought nothing new to America. We have witnessed centuries of racial injustice. Um, Black lives have been at stake from the moment of our arrival here on this continent. And so I've been trying to listen in different places and with a different kind of intentionality. And that has been startling, and it's also been a kind of source of guidance that felt new to me.
Interesting. And you said one of the things you said was your poetry and what you want to say to the world. Do you think, and this is to both of you, do you look at the act of writing as what you want to say to the world as much as what you want to just say to yourself, or how do you sort through that?
Honestly, although The Hill We Climb is, recognized as an inaugural poem for the country, when I wrote it, I did not know if it would be possible to recite it at the inauguration. I was watching the insurrection, and in my head, I didn't even know if there would be an inauguration. And so it was writing an inaugural poem that I would want to hear. And that's kind of the way that I inversely think about poetry. It's not necessarily something that I'm saying, it's something that I'm listening to. It's me kind of turning up the volume dial of the world and letting my ears be open to it and letting kind of the sound and the voices and the meaning enter me. And it's from that type of listening that then I began to speak.
Hmm, that's interesting. So in some ways, if that insurrection hadn't happened, you imagine it probably would have been a very different poem that you wrote, do you think?
I think it would have been different. Like Tracy said, I think so many aspects of what has happened has not been new. But if anything, it's added another layer of urgency and necessity. I think I would have said a lot of the same things, but as I was writing it, it was with the idea that this is not just something that I'm writing, it's something that the country needs to hear. This is
Mm.
necessary. And I think that's what changed the dynamics of the poem for me. All of a sudden it added a new quality of emergency status to poetry for me.
It makes so
Interesting.
much sense that you were watching the insurrection as you were composing the poem, because one of the things that I feel that that poem does so beautifully is it embraces the fact that we have work to do.
Mm,
You're not leaning backward, which is a great temptation for an inaugural poem, toward this grand sense of a mythic past that we as a nation descend from.
right.
And you are saying all of us have work to do with the gifts that we have and the belief that we have in democracy, in the value of our lives and our voices and our perspectives. And it's a poem that I think is so refreshing because it challenges us.
Mm,
You're saying basically, if we want to live up to this dream of a perfect democracy, we need to we need to get out there and make that happen.
right.
And it makes perfect sense to me that you were witnessing what seemed like a lot of progress being undone before our
Mm.
eyes by people that we could see, moving through space. um, it's meaningful to learn that that was in the front of your imagination as you were inviting all of us to take part in a constructive type of collective work.
Thank you. That means so much to me. I mean, my career is done now. I'm gonna take that little clip of what Tracy
Hopefully
said,
not. I
put
think
it
it's
above my door, and like I can rest easy now. I have ascended.